The auditorium was alive with cheers. Bright banners hung from the ceiling, proud parents raised their phones high to capture the moment, and the sound of applause rolled across the rows like a steady wave. It was a day of celebration, a day when hundreds of students stepped forward to claim the result of years of effort. For most, it was a memory they would hold on to forever, wrapped in the voices of family and friends. But tucked into the far side of the hall, near a wide window where the afternoon light streamed in, a young woman sat in a wheelchair, almost unnoticed by the world rushing past her. Her name was Alexandra. The dark fabric of her graduation gown draped neatly across her lap, and the square cap rested slightly off balance on her long blonde hair. She wasn't looking at the stage or the cameras. Instead, her eyes lingered on the glass panes, as if searching for something outside that she couldn't quite find. Around her, the laughter of students filled the air, but none of it seemed to reach her. She had finished one of the hardest journeys of her life, yet she sat alone, holding a folded program in her hand so tightly that the edges were already crumpled. No one came to clap her on the shoulder, no one called her name for a picture. It was as though, in the middle of so much noise, she was caught in complete silence. On the other side of the hall, a boy tugged at his father's hand. He had messy brown hair that stuck up no matter how much water was used to tame it, and his eyes were wide with the kind of curiosity only a child could have. His father, Marcus, wore jeans with faint streaks of grease from long days at the repair shop. He was not there for Alexandra. He had come simply to celebrate a friend's graduation, never expecting the day would carry a different meaning. "Dad," the boy whispered, pointing toward the quiet figure near the window. "Why is she sitting all by herself?" Marcus followed his son's gaze. The sight pulled at something deep inside him. The girl looked not just alone, but invisible, as though the joy around her had left her behind. He knew that feeling more than he cared to admit. For a moment, he thought about brushing off the question, telling his son that maybe her family was running late, but he couldn't ignore the ache in his chest, the one that came from recognizing loneliness when he saw it. The boy's hand pressed into his palm again, eager, insistent. "She looks sad. Can we say hi?" Marcus hesitated. Approaching strangers was not something he usually encouraged. Yet, as he looked again at the young woman's lowered gaze and the way her fingers clenched the program, he thought of all the times he himself had wished someone, anyone, would notice when he was carrying too much alone. He sighed softly, squeezing his son's small hand. "All right, buddy," he said. "We'll just go over and say congratulations. If she wants space, we'll give it to her." And with that, the two of them began walking through the sea of families, each step carrying them closer to a girl who had no idea her life was about to shift in a way she never expected. As Marcus and his son drew closer, the noise of the crowd seemed to fade. Alexandra still hadn't noticed them. She was lost in her thoughts, staring at the streak of sunlight pouring through the tall window. Tommy was the first to break the quiet. His small voice carried a surprising confidence for a child his age. "Hi," he said brightly, tilting his head up toward her. "Congratulations! My dad says graduation is a really big deal." Alexandra blinked, startled, as if pulled out of a dream. Her green eyes, rimmed faintly with red, darted from the boy to his father, uncertain what to make of the sudden intrusion. For a moment she simply stared, clutching the crumpled program in her lap. "Thank you," she finally whispered, her voice soft, almost unsure of itself. Marcus offered a gentle smile, crouching slightly so he wasn't towering over her. "I hope we're not bothering you," he said. "My son noticed you sitting here, and he thought it was important to come say hello." Alexandra's shoulders shifted, the faintest trace of hesitation loosening. "No, you're not bothering me. It's nice of you to stop." Tommy, with the kind of directness that only a child could manage, leaned forward. "Are you really smart? You must be to finish school like this." Marcus gave a quick shake of his head. "Tommy," he murmured in warning. But Alexandra surprised them both by letting out a small laugh, quiet but real. It softened her face, breaking through the sadness that had weighed on her expression since they first saw her. "I suppose I must be at least a little smart," she said gently. "It hasn't been easy, but I made it through." Her hand brushed the armrest of her chair, a subtle motion that carried more weight than her words. Marcus caught the flicker of pain in her tone, the kind that wasn't only physical. Tommy, oblivious to the tension, grinned wide. "My name's Tommy. This is my dad, Marcus. We came to see his friend graduate. It's our first time at one of these." "That's wonderful," Alexandra replied, her voice steadier now. She looked at Marcus briefly, then back to the boy, as if the innocence of a child was easier to face than the curiosity of an adult. For a brief moment, the three of them stood in a small circle of calm, apart from the shouts and camera flashes around them. It wasn't much, just a greeting, just a few words, but Marcus sensed the shift. The loneliness he'd seen in her eyes when they first approached wasn't quite as sharp. And for Alexandra, the kindness of two strangers felt like the first crack of light breaking into a room she had kept closed for far too long. The noise of the graduation still filled the air, but in their small corner by the window, everything felt quieter, almost private. Marcus noticed that Alexandra's cap had slipped slightly to one side. Without thinking too much, Tommy tilted his head and said, "Your hat looks funny." For the first time, Alexandra's lips curved into something that was almost a smile. She reached up and adjusted the square cap with an awkward but careful motion. "Better?" she asked. "Much better," Tommy declared with the confidence of a boy who believed his opinion mattered in every situation. Marcus gave an apologetic look, but Alexandra shook her head. "It's all right. I like honesty." Her voice was steadier now, a little less fragile. Marcus stayed crouched beside his son, speaking gently so she could hear him clearly. "We were here for my friend Roberto's graduation. Tommy insisted on coming along. He gets more excited than the graduates themselves." "That sounds familiar," Alexandra murmured. "I used to be that way when I was little. I thought every graduation was magical, all the lights and music, it always felt bigger than life." Her gaze drifted toward the stage where students were still walking across. Then it fell again to her lap, where the folded program rested. Marcus caught the way her fingers pressed into the paper, as though holding back something she didn't want to say out loud. Tommy leaned forward suddenly, his brown hair flopping into his eyes. "Are you waiting for your family?" The question hung in the air, simple but piercing. Alexandra's shoulders stiffened, and for a moment she looked like she might not answer. Then with a faint sigh she shook her head. "No, my father had to travel for work. He couldn't be here." Marcus felt a sting in his chest at the words. He knew that feeling, the emptiness of milestones without the people you wished were there. He had lived through birthdays, school plays, and long nights with only himself to fill the role of two parents. Watching Alexandra in this moment, he saw not just a young woman in a wheelchair, but someone who carried the same weight of being unseen. Tommy, too young to understand the full depth, simply said, "That's not fair. Everyone should have somebody here today." Then, without asking, he reached over and gently patted her hand. The gesture was small, almost careless, but Marcus saw the way Alexandra froze for a heartbeat, then let out a shaky breath. Her green eyes lifted to his, filled with something he recognized. The quiet relief of finally being noticed. The weight of Tommy's small hand resting on hers lingered in the air. Alexandra looked down at his fingers, then back up, her voice softer than before. "You're very kind," she said. Marcus cleared his throat gently, wanting to ease the moment without breaking it. "You know," he began, "every graduate should have a photo to look back on. Would you like us to take one for you?" For a second, Alexandra seemed caught off guard, as if no one had thought to offer her something so simple. "Oh, I don't want to trouble you." "It's no trouble at all," Marcus replied quickly. "I may not be a professional, but I've taken more pictures of this kid than I can count. He says I'm the best photographer he knows." Tommy nodded eagerly, his grin wide. "It's true. Dad takes pictures all the time, mostly of me doing silly faces." That earned another laugh from Alexandra, lighter this time, as though the heaviness in her chest had eased just a little. She straightened in her chair, adjusting her cap once more. "All right then, a picture would be nice." Marcus pulled his old phone from his pocket, carefully stepping back to frame the shot. He asked Tommy to stand beside her, and the boy leaned in proudly, as though Alexandra were a member of their own family. "Okay," Marcus said, holding the phone steady. "Smile just the way you want to remember today." Alexandra's lips trembled for a heartbeat, then curved into a genuine smile. Not forced, not polite, real. The kind of smile that came from being seen after too long of being invisible. Marcus clicked the photo, then another, shifting to find the light that streamed in through the tall window. When he showed her the screen, her eyes widened just a little. "That's actually a really good picture." "I told you," Tommy chimed in, puffing up with pride. Marcus met her gaze, his tone gentle. "You deserve to have this memory, you worked hard for it." For a moment, Alexandra didn't speak. Her throat moved as though she were holding back words too heavy to share. Finally, she whispered, "Thank you, I'll remember this." Outside, the ceremony carried on with cheers and clapping, but in that quiet corner by the window, it felt like something else had begun. Something smaller, more personal, yet far more lasting. Alexandra kept glancing at the photo on Marcus's phone, her fingers brushing over the image on the screen as though she was afraid it might disappear. The corners of her lips held the trace of that smile, the one she hadn't worn all day until now. Tommy rocked back on his heels, his energy bubbling as always. "You should come celebrate with us," he said suddenly. "Tommy," Marcus interrupted gently, but Alexandra tilted her head, curious. "Celebrate how?" The boy grinned wide. "Ice cream. We always get ice cream when something big happens. Well, almost always. Dad says it's too expensive sometimes, but today feels special." Marcus felt his face warm. "Buddy," he began, but Alexandra lifted a hand, stopping him. "That actually sounds wonderful," she said softly. I was just planning on going home, but maybe I shouldn't spend the evening alone." She hesitated for a breath, then added, "Let me treat you both. Consider it my way of saying thank you." Marcus blinked, surprised by her sudden shift. "You really don't have to." "I want to," Alexandra interrupted firmly, though her voice was gentle. "It would make me happy." There was no arguing with that. Marcus caught Tommy's eager expression and realised the decision had already been made. With a small nod, he slipped his phone back into his pocket. "All right then, ice cream it is." As they made their way toward the exit, the noise of the auditorium faded behind them. Alexandra moved carefully through the crowd in her chair, and Marcus walked at her side while Tommy skipped just ahead. From a distance, they might have looked like any small group of family members weaving their way through a busy celebration. When they reached the door, Alexandra paused for a moment, her eyes catching the late afternoon sunlight spilling across the steps outside. "You know," she murmured, almost to herself, "I was dreading today, but maybe it won't be the memory I thought it would." Marcus glanced at her, and for the first time he saw not just the loneliness she carried, but the possibility of something brighter breaking through. And as Tommy bounced impatiently, urging them toward the little ice cream shop he loved, Alexandra allowed herself to follow, carrying with her a feeling she hadn't expected to find on a day she thought she'd face alone. The little shop was tucked on the corner of a quiet street, with mismatched chairs and old photographs lining the walls. It was the kind of place where families stopped after baseball games, where children pressed their faces to the glass to pick a flavour, and where time seemed to slow down under the hum of ceiling fans. Tommy darted ahead as soon as they entered, pressing close to the display case, his breath fogging the glass. "Look, Dad, they have cookie dough, that's the best one." Marcus chuckled, sliding a hand through his hair, then turned to Alexandra. "What about you? Any favourites?" She rolled a little closer, studying the tubs of colour through the glass. "I've always liked mint chocolate," she said after a pause. "Something about it feels fresh, like a new start." They ordered, and soon the three of them sat together at a small table near the window. Tommy dug into his ice cream with the kind of joy only a child could muster, leaving streaks of chocolate on his upper lip. Alexandra took her time, letting the cool sweetness melt slowly on her tongue. She glanced at Marcus, then lowered her eyes to the cup in her hands. "You're lucky," she said softly. Marcus looked at her, puzzled. "Lucky? I'm not sure I hear that very often." She nodded toward Tommy, who was still humming happily between bites. "You have him. Someone to share these little moments with. I've spent a lot of my life sitting at tables like this by myself." Marcus was quiet for a moment. The clink of spoons and faint laughter from other customers filled the space between them. Finally he spoke, his voice low. It isn't always easy raising him alone. Some days I feel like I'm running on fumes. But seeing him laugh like that, yeah, I guess that does make me lucky. Tommy looked up, his mouth smeared with chocolate. I told you, Dad, we're a team. Alexandra smiled, the kind of smile that softened the edges of her sadness. He's right, you are a team. She hesitated, then added, I had an accident in college. That's why I use this chair now. It changed everything. The hardest part wasn't the pain or the adjustments. It was how quickly people stopped seeing me the same way. Some pulled away, others only saw the chair. Marcus met her eyes, steady and calm. I see someone who just finished a degree, someone who fought hard to be sitting here today. The words lingered, simple but heavy with truth. Alexandra lowered her gaze, blinking back something she didn't want to show too openly. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel invisible. When the last spoonful of ice cream was gone and the sun had dipped lower across the rooftops, they said their goodbyes outside the little shop. Alexandra thanked them again, her smile hesitant but real, before wheeling toward the bus stop. Marcus watched her go, Tommy waving enthusiastically until she disappeared around the corner. That night, long after Tommy had drifted to sleep, Marcus found himself replaying the afternoon in his mind. The way Alexandra's smile had lit up when she saw her photo. The steadiness in her voice when she spoke of her challenges. The quiet strength she carried, even when she thought no one noticed. It stayed with him, more than he expected. The next morning, a small message arrived on his phone. Thank you again for making my graduation day feel less lonely. I don't usually send notes like this, but I wanted you to know it mattered. Signed simply, Alexandra. Marcus stared at the words, his thumb hovering before he finally typed back. It was our pleasure. Tommy already asked when we'll see you again. From then on, the silence of their days began to shift. Alexandra would send him little updates, photos of her apartment window catching the sunset, a snapshot of a book she was reading, a line about a job interview she was preparing for. Marcus, in turn, shared pieces of his own world, pictures of the cars he worked on at the shop, Tommy's school projects, even the lopsided drawing Tommy made of our new friend Alexandra. For Tommy, it became second nature. He would rush home from school, eager to show her his Lego towers over video call, or ask if she could hear the song he had just learned in music class. To him, she wasn't someone new and fragile. She was simply part of their small circle, as natural as if she had always been there. And for Alexandra, the steady rhythm of those exchanges became something more than she had ever expected. After years of being surrounded by people yet feeling unseen, she now found herself looking forward to each message, each call, each laugh that reached her through the screen. It was not dramatic or sudden. It was the quiet kind of connection that grows in ordinary days, the kind that makes loneliness soften and begins to teach you that maybe, just maybe, you are not as alone as you once thought. It had been a few weeks since that first meeting, and the rhythm of their new connection felt almost natural. Marcus had grown used to hearing his phone buzz with a short message from Alexandra in the evenings, and Tommy had come to expect that she would be part of his stories after school. One Saturday afternoon, as Marcus and Tommy walked up the steps to Alexandra's small apartment building with a bag of takeout in hand, they found someone already standing at the door. A tall man in a pressed jacket, silver hair combed neatly back, his phone pressed to his ear. His expression was sharp, focused, the kind of look that made people step aside. When he hung up, his eyes landed on them, then on Alexandra, who was wheeling herself through the lobby to meet them. Alexandra, he said firmly, his tone carrying the authority of a man used to being obeyed. I didn't realize you had company. Her hands froze on the rims of her chair for a moment. Dad, I didn't expect you to be back so soon. Marcus shifted, suddenly aware of the oil stains that never seemed to wash out of his jeans. Tommy, oblivious to the tension, waved brightly. Hi, I'm Tommy, we brought dinner. Nathan's gaze flicked down to the boy, then up to Marcus, assessing them in a glance. He extended a polite but stiff nod. And you are? Marcus, he replied, his voice even but cautious. A friend. The older man's eyes narrowed slightly, though his smile never quite reached them. A friend, he repeated, as if testing the word. Then, turning back to his daughter, he added, "We need to talk. Alone." Alexandra's fingers tightened on the arms of her chair. "Dad, Marcus and Tommy are my guests. We were just about to have dinner together." Nathan's brow furrowed, but he didn't argue in front of them. "Very well," he said shortly, "but we will speak later." With that, he stepped aside, holding the door open stiffly as though formality could hide his disapproval. Inside, as the three of them settled around the small kitchen table, Marcus caught the faint tremor in Alexandra's hands. She tried to smile, brushing it off, but her eyes gave her away. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "He travels a lot for work. He isn't used to this." Marcus didn't press. He knew what it felt like to live under the weight of someone else's expectations. But as he helped unpack the takeout, he couldn't shake the feeling that Nathan Sinclair would not easily accept the place he and Tommy had begun to hold in Alexandra's life. And for the first time, Marcus wondered if kindness alone would be enough to bridge the worlds they each came from. That evening, after Marcus and Tommy had gone home, Alexandra found herself sitting across the kitchen table from her father. The takeout containers still sat half empty between them, but Nathan hadn't touched much of his food. His eyes were sharp, his jaw set in a way she recognised from countless boardroom stories he had told her. "Alexandra," he began, his tone clipped but not unkind, "I need to know what this is, who that man is, why his son is sitting at your table." She folded her hands in her lap, her voice steady, though her heart raced. "Marcus is my friend. He and Tommy were there for me on graduation day when you couldn't be. They didn't ask for anything, they just showed up, and that meant more than you realise." Nathan leaned back, sighing heavily. "I work hard to make sure you have the best care, the best opportunities. That's my responsibility as your father. I don't want you settling for less because you feel lonely." Her green eyes met his, firm. "Less? Dad, you think value is measured in money or titles. But Marcus listens to me. He respects me. And Tommy treats me like I'm just Alexandra, not a problem to solve or someone to pity. That isn't less, it's more than I've had in a long time." The words caught Nathan off guard. For once, he had no sharp reply. He drummed his fingers on the table, avoiding her gaze. "I only want what's best for you," he muttered. "I know," she said softly. "But maybe what's best isn't what you imagine. Maybe it's what makes me feel whole." Later that week, when Marcus stopped by the shop to pick Tommy up from school, Alexandra shared the conversation with him. He shifted uncomfortably, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't blame him for worrying," Marcus admitted. "He sees a guy who dropped out of school, who turns wrenches for a living. I don't exactly look like the kind of future a father dreams of for his daughter." Alexandra wheeled closer, her eyes steady on his. "You see yourself that way? I don't. I see someone who shows up, someone who makes his son laugh, who notices when I'm struggling, who doesn't walk away. That matters more than any degree or title." Marcus swallowed hard, his throat tightening. He wanted to believe her, but the weight of years spent feeling not enough pressed heavy on his chest. Still, when she reached out and placed her hand lightly on his, something shifted. "You don't have to prove anything," she said quietly. "Not to my father, not to me. Just keep being who you are. That's already enough." In that moment, Marcus realised it wasn't just about kindness anymore. It was about the possibility of building something real, something lasting, even if the world around them didn't fully understand. Spring sunlight stretched across the park, warming the grass where families had gathered for the school picnic. Children darted between blankets, their laughter rising above the strum of a guitar someone played nearby. Marcus spread out an old checkered blanket, setting down a cooler he had borrowed from a friend. Beside him, Tommy ran ahead, already calling out to classmates. A few moments later, Alexandra wheeled across the lawn toward them, a soft breeze tugging at her hair. She looked different here, away from the solemnity of graduation or the tension of her father's visits. There was a lightness in her eyes, the kind that came from choosing to show up, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. "Over here!" Tommy shouted, waving his arms until she laughed and made her way to the blanket. He immediately launched into introductions, proudly telling anyone who would listen, "This is my friend Alexandra. She's really smart. She just graduated from the big school." The children crowded around with the blunt curiosity only kids carry. "Does it hurt to use a chair?" one girl asked. Sometimes, Alexandra answered honestly, her smile steady. But everyone has something that makes life tricky. Some wear glasses, some need hearing aids, and I use this to get around. We're all just different in our own ways. The children accepted the answer easily, moving on to tug at Tommy's arm for a game of tag. Marcus watched the exchange with quiet awe. She fit here. Not because she tried to, but because she carried herself in a way that made space for others. As the afternoon rolled on, they shared sandwiches, stories, and laughter. Marcus found himself lying back on the blanket, the sun warm on his face, listening to Tommy's voice rise above the chatter as he tried to teach Alexandra the rules of a game she clearly didn't know, but played along with anyway. In a quiet moment, when Tommy was off with friends, Marcus turned to her. "You know," he said, his voice low, "for a long time I thought our family was missing something. That without Clara, we would always be incomplete. But watching Tommy today, watching you here with him, maybe we've been whole all along. We just needed the right people to share it with." Alexandra's eyes glistened as she reached over, resting her hand gently on his. "And I've spent most of my life believing I was too much trouble, too different. But you and Tommy, you've never made me feel like I had to be anyone else. You've made me feel enough." They sat there in the golden light, not needing to say more. The laughter of children carried on the wind, mingling with the easy rhythm of the day. When Tommy ran back, cheeks flushed and hair sticking to his forehead, he flopped down between them. "We're a team," he declared, as though that settled everything. Marcus ruffled his son's hair, Alexandra smiling beside them. And in that moment, beneath the wide-open sky, it was clear. What had begun as a simple act of kindness at a graduation had grown into something neither of them could have imagined, an ordinary yet extraordinary beginning of a life they were choosing together. Life lesson. True family isn't always the one you're born into. It's the people who choose to stand by you, see your worth, and make you feel less alone. Sometimes a simple act of kindness can be the beginning of a whole new chapter of love and belonging. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of this story. I'm truly grateful for your time. If the story touched your heart, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you again in the next video, right here on Rain Inside.